You are not welcome here." John, a veteran who had fought bravely for his country, had been looking forward to enjoying the familiar, delicious food at Tom's diner, which he often visited. Just because of his skin color, he was so ruthlessly driven out by the owner, Tom. This sudden humiliation plunged John into deep distress. But who could have imagined that the series of events that followed would be like the flapping of a butterfly's wings, completely changing the course of the whole town? Hey everyone, welcome to Worldly Whispers. Let's get started. In a cozy, Southern-style community, the sun's rays gently warmed the streets. John Carter, a well-respected veteran, pulled up to Tom's diner in his old, yet trusty pickup truck. His body, bearing the marks of years of military service, ached as he stepped out. The diner, with its faded sign, had been a familiar haunt for John over the years. He was always drawn by the promise of good food and friendly conversations. As John pushed open the diner's door, the familiar jingle of bells rang out. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon wafted through the air, making his stomach growl in anticipation. Usually this was a place filled with warmth and chatter, but today something felt amiss. Tom Harris, the diner's owner, emerged from the kitchen. His face, which was typically creased with a welcoming smile, was set in a hard, unfriendly line. John, oblivious to the change in Tom's demeanor at first, greeted him as he always did and ordered his regular, a steaming cup of coffee and a slice of the diner's famous apple pie. Tom's response was unexpected. He claimed that they were out of pie, even though a beautifully baked apple pie sat right on the counter, its aroma filling the air. When John pointed this out, Tom's voice grew sharp. He then announced that the diner was closing early and that John had to leave. Confused and hurt, John asked Tom what he had done wrong. Tom's true feelings were revealed in an instant. His face twisted into an ugly sneer as he said, "You've done plenty just by walking in here. I don't serve your kind in my establishment. Now get out before I have to call the authorities." These words hit John like a physical blow. He had never expected such treatment, especially from someone he had considered a friend for years. A young woman sitting at a nearby table couldn't remain silent. She stood up and said, "This isn't right. You can't treat him like this." Tom, however, rounded on her. His face flushed with anger, he shouted, "This is my diner, and I'll run it how I see fit. If you don't like it, you can leave too." The young woman hesitated. Caught between her desire to stand up for what was right and her fear of confrontation, she ultimately sat back down, her eyes filled with shame as she watched John shuffle out of the diner. After being ousted from Tom's diner, John Carter sat in his truck, his heart heavy with a mix of hurt, humiliation, and simmering anger. The weight of Tom's discriminatory words pressed down on him, but he refused to let this injustice define him. He knew he had to take action, not just for himself, but for all those who might face similar prejudice in the future. Back at the diner, Tom was met with an immediate and harsh backlash. Regular customers, appalled by his blatant display of bigotry, began to walk out. Some threw him disapproving glares, while others simply shook their heads in disappointment. But Tom, stubbornly clinging to the beliefs instilled in him by his father, remained unyielding. He thought he had done what was right, that he was upholding some misguided sense of principle. The news of the incident spread like wildfire throughout the small town. People gathered in groups, their voices hushed as they discussed the shocking event. John Carter was well known and respected in the community, and the idea that he had been treated so cruelly at the hands of someone he considered a friend was hard to fathom. In Washington, D.C., John's son, Michael Carter, a powerful U.S. senator with a long-standing commitment to civil rights and veterans issues, received a call from a family friend back home. As he listened to the account of what had happened to his father, a wave of fury washed over him. His grip on the phone tightened, and his knuckles turned white. Michael knew that a knee-jerk reaction, like using his political power to simply punish Tom, would not address the root of the problem. It might even exacerbate the divide in the community. Instead, he decided to approach the situation with a more strategic and long-term view. He began to make a series of calls, reaching out to his network of contacts, including legal experts, community leaders, and social justice advocates. The next day, Tom arrived at the diner to find a small but determined group of protesters outside. They held signs that read "No to Racism" and "Equality for All." Tom's face flushed with anger as he pushed past them to unlock the door. Inside, he tried to carry on with his normal routine, but he was constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just as the lunch rush was starting, the doorbell of the diner jingled. In walked Michael Carter, his presence commanding attention. Tom's initial reaction was one of defiance. He puffed out his chest and glared at Michael, as if to say he had nothing to be ashamed of. Michael, however, remained calm and composed. He looked Tom straight in the eye and said, "I'm Michael Carter, John Carter's son. We need to have a serious conversation about what you did to my father yesterday." Tom's bravado wavered slightly at the mention of John's name, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know who you think you are," Tom retorted, his voice gruff, "but this is my establishment, and I have the right to serve who I want." Michael's expression remained neutral, but there was a steely glint in his eyes. "Is that so?" he replied softly. "And on what grounds did you refuse service to my father, a decorated veteran who has lived in this town longer than you've been alive?" Tom's face reddened, and he stammered, I don't have to explain myself to you. Your father and people like him aren't welcome here. End of story." A hush fell over the diner as the other patrons watched the tense exchange with a mix of horror and fascination. Michael took a step closer to Tom. "Mr. Harris," he said, his voice low but filled with a quiet determination, "what you did yesterday was not only morally reprehensible but also illegal. I intend to use every resource at my disposal to ensure that you face the consequences of your actions." Tom's bravado finally crumbled, and he realized the gravity of the situation he was in. He had no idea that John Carter's son was such a powerful figure, and now he was in over his head. As Michael left the diner, he knew that this was just the beginning. He was determined to use this incident as an opportunity to effect real change in the community, to break down the walls of prejudice and discrimination that had been built up over the years. And he was confident that with perseverance and the right approach, he could turn this situation around. Over the next few days, Michael continued his efforts. He met with local community leaders, urging them to take a stand against racism and discrimination. He also started to look into Tom's financial situation, discovering that the diner had been struggling for some time. This information, he thought, could be used to his advantage in his plan to teach Tom a lesson and bring about a positive transformation in the town. The town, meanwhile, was in a state of unrest. People were divided in their opinions about what had happened at the diner. Some supported Tom, believing that he had the right to run his business as he saw fit. Others were outraged by his actions and called for justice for John Carter. The situation was tense, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. But one thing was certain: the small town would never be the same again, all because of one man's act of prejudice and the determination of a son to fight for his father's dignity. After Michael Carter's visit to the diner, Tom Harris was left in a state of turmoil. The diner, once a bustling place filled with the chatter of regular customers, now sat mostly empty. The few patrons who did come in were quiet, their eyes averted from Tom as they ate in uncomfortable silence. Tom could feel their unspoken judgment, and it weighed heavily on him. The next morning, as Tom arrived at the diner, he noticed a thick envelope slipped under the door. With trembling hands, he picked it up and tore it open. Inside was an offer to buy his diner for nearly double its market value. The offer was made anonymously through a law firm he had never heard of. There were strict conditions attached. He had to leave the premises immediately and was prohibited from opening another business in the area. Tom was torn. The diner had been in his family for generations. It was not just a business, it was a part of his identity, a link to his father and the legacy he had left behind. His father had built the diner from the ground up, and Tom had always been proud to carry on the family name. But in recent years, the diner had been struggling. Competition from new restaurants in the area, combined with his own stubborn refusal to adapt to changing customer preferences, had taken a toll on the business. Sarah, his loyal waitress of many years, noticed the change in Tom's demeanor. She had seen him reading the letter with a look of shock and confusion on his face. "Tom, are you okay?" she asked gently. Tom quickly stuffed the letter into his pocket, muttering that he was fine. But Sarah knew him too well. "Tom, I know you're going through a tough time, and I think you should consider apologizing to Mr. Carter. It's not too late to make things right," she said. Tom's face hardened. "I can't just apologize, Sarah. It's not that simple. My father, he taught me certain values, and I thought I was standing up for them." Sarah shook her head. "Your father was a good man, Tom, but what you did to Mr. Carter was wrong. And this diner, it's not the same without the regulars. We need to fix this." Across town, Michael Carter was in a meeting with a group of community leaders. "What happened to my father is not an isolated incident," he said, his voice firm. "It's a symptom of a deeper problem in our community. But we have an opportunity here to turn this into a catalyst for change. He then laid out his plan to buy Tom's Diner and transform it into a place that would bring the community together. We'll make it a symbol of unity, a place where people of all backgrounds can come and feel welcome, he explained. The community leaders were initially skeptical. Buying the diner? What's the point? One of them asked. Michael smiled. The point is to show that we won't tolerate discrimination. And by turning the diner into something positive, we can start a conversation about race and equality in our town. We can break down the barriers that have been dividing us for so long. As the meeting continued, the leaders began to see the potential in Michael's plan. They started to discuss how they could support the project, from fundraising to volunteering their time. Michael knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to see it through. Back at the diner, Tom was still grappling with the offer. He spent the day alone, with few customers to distract him. Every time he looked around the diner, he saw memories of his father, of the long hours they had spent together, of the customers who had become like family over the years. But he also saw the empty tables, the dwindling profits, and the growing isolation. That evening, as he sat in his office, he pulled out the offer letter again. He read it over and over, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, selling the diner would mean letting go of a family legacy. On the other hand, it would provide him with a financial windfall and a way out of the mess he had created. And deep down, he knew that Sarah was right. He had made a terrible mistake, and he needed to find a way to make amends. As the sun set outside, Tom made a decision. He picked up the phone and dialed the number on the letter. "This is Tom Harris," he said, his voice rough. "I'm calling about the offer to buy my diner." Tom Harris finally decided to accept the mysterious offer to sell his diner. The moment he made that call, a new chapter in the small town story began. Michael Carter and his father, John Carter, wasted no time in moving forward with their ambitious plan. The news of the diner's sale spread like wildfire through the town. People were filled with curiosity and speculation. Some thought it might be bought by a big, name chain, while others guessed it could be turned into a trendy coffee shop. But no one could have predicted what was really in store. As the renovation work commenced, the once familiar diner was hidden behind layers of tarps and scaffolding. Workers bustled in and out, their hammers and drills creating a constant din. The local community watched with bated breath, eager to see what the new owners had in mind. Finally, the day of the grand unveiling arrived. A large crowd gathered outside the diner, their chatter filled with anticipation. As the clock struck noon, the tarps were pulled away, and the doors swung open. Standing in the doorway, beaming with pride, was John Carter. "Welcome, everyone," he announced in a strong, clear voice. "Welcome to the veteran table." The interior of the diner had been completely transformed. The walls were now adorned with an array of photographs and memorabilia from various wars. Pictures of veterans from different ethnic backgrounds, their faces weathered but proud, lined the walls. There were also old uniforms, medals, and letters, all telling stories of sacrifice and service. The booths, once plain and worn, were now reupholstered in a deep, rich blue, reminiscent of military uniforms. The tables were clean and shiny, with small American flags placed in holders at each corner. But the most striking feature was the large mural on the back wall. It depicted a diverse group of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder. At the center were a young black soldier and a young white soldier, their arms around each other's shoulders. For those who knew the story of John Carter and Tom Harris Sr., the resemblance was unmistakable. John stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "This diner has long been a part of our community," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "But it has also, unfortunately, been a symbol of division. Today we change that. The veteran table will be more than just a place to eat. It will be a community hub, a place where veterans can find support, and where people from all walks of life can come together, share meals, and build bridges." Just as the audience was absorbing John's words, there was a stir from the kitchen area. To everyone's astonishment, Tom Harris emerged, wearing a crisp white chef's uniform. He looked nervous and hesitant as he made his way to the front of the diner. Tom took a deep breath and began to speak. "I know I'm probably the last person you expected to see here," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did, what I believed, it was wrong, terribly wrong." He paused for a moment, gathering his courage. "But John and Michael Carter have given me a chance I don't deserve, to learn, to grow, and to be better than I was. And I promise you, I will spend every day trying to earn the trust you've placed in me." The diner fell silent as Tom's words sank in. For a moment, it seemed as if time had stopped. Then slowly, someone in the crowd began to clap. Others joined in, and soon the room was filled with applause. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a sign of acceptance, an acknowledgement of the difficult journey Tom had ahead of him. As the day went on, the diner was filled with people. Some were veterans, drawn by the sense of camaraderie and the chance to share their stories. Others were community members, eager to be a part of this new beginning. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, with conversations flowing freely and laughter filling the air. In the kitchen, Tom worked alongside a new, diverse staff. He was no longer the stubborn, bigoted man he once was. Instead, he was focused on his cooking, on creating delicious meals that would bring people together. With each dish he prepared, he felt a sense of purpose, a way to make amends for his past mistakes. Outside, the word about the veteran table spread even further. Neighboring towns heard about the remarkable transformation, and people began to make the trip to experience it for themselves. The diner became a symbol of hope, a place where the community could come together, heal old wounds, and build a more inclusive future. The story of the veteran table didn't stay confined to the small town. It quickly spread far and wide, catching the attention of a national news network. Intrigued by the remarkable transformation, they reached out to John Carter, expressing their desire to feature the diner in a news story. At first, John was hesitant. He hadn't embarked on this journey for recognition, but rather for justice and change. However, after some thought, he realized that sharing their story could inspire others facing similar challenges. So, he agreed to the interview. The day the news crew arrived, the town was abuzz with excitement. People gathered outside the diner, hoping to catch a glimpse of the cameras or even get interviewed themselves. Inside, John sat at one of the booths, with the mural of diverse soldiers as a powerful backdrop. During the interview, he spoke candidly about the discrimination he had faced at Tom's diner. He described the pain of being rejected due to his race, and how that experience had led to this new beginning. "It would have been easy to respond with anger," John said, "but we chose love and understanding instead. We saw it as an opportunity to grow and heal." Tom Harris also joined the interview. His hands shook slightly at first as he recounted his journey of transformation. "I was blinded by prejudice," he admitted. "I was raised with certain beliefs that I now know were wrong. John and Michael's kindness opened my eyes. I'm working every day to become a better person." The news feature aired during prime time on a Sunday evening. As millions of viewers across the country tuned in, the response was overwhelming. Social media exploded with reactions. People were inspired by the story of a small town diner that had become a symbol of hope and unity. The veteran table quickly became a trending topic. In the days following the broadcast, the diner was inundated with visitors. People traveled from far-off places, some driving for hours or even days, just to experience the atmosphere of acceptance and healing. Community leaders from other towns and cities started reaching out. They were eager to learn how to create similar initiatives in their own areas. John and Michael found themselves constantly fielding calls and emails, offering advice on how to bridge divides and promote healing. A group of filmmakers, deeply moved by the story, approached John, Michael, and Tom about creating a documentary. They wanted to delve deeper into the issues of prejudice, forgiveness, and community transformation. Filming began, and over the next few months, the crew followed their every step. They captured the daily operations of the diner, the community events held there, and the ongoing process of healing and growth. One of the most powerful moments during filming was the interview with Tom Harris Sr. Despite his declining health, his mind was sharp. He spoke openly about the roots of his prejudice, stemming from a tragic event during the war. "I let that one moment define how I saw an entire group of people," he said, his voice weak but filled with regret. "But being here, seeing what my son and John have built, it's opened my eyes. I wish I had learned this lesson sooner." As the documentary neared completion, it generated significant anticipation. Major film festivals expressed interest in premiering it, and there was even talk of Oscar potential. But for John, Michael, and Tom, the real measure of success was the positive impact they saw in their community and the lives they had changed. The documentary finally premiered in a packed theater in New York City. John, Michael, and Tom walked the red carpet, a surreal experience for all of them. As the film played, the audience was spellbound. They witnessed the ugly reality of discrimination at the start, but were then inspired by the journey of transformation. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and the applause was thunderous. During the QA session, The questions were deep and thought-provoking. One viewer asked John how he found the strength to forgive. John replied, "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing not to let hatred consume you. It's about seeing the humanity in everyone, even those who have wronged you. It's not easy, but it's necessary for us to move forward as a society." Another person asked Tom what advice he would give to others with similar prejudices. Tom said, "Let go of hate. It only hurts you in the end. Open your heart to diversity, and you'll discover a whole new world of experiences." The documentary was later picked up by a major streaming service, making it accessible to a global audience. The story of the veteran table sparked conversations about race, reconciliation, and community healing in living rooms, classrooms, and boardrooms around the world. Back in the small town, the diner continued to thrive. It became a pilgrimage site for many. Veterans found solace and support, and community members of all backgrounds came together. Tom, true to his word, worked hard to maintain the trust he had slowly gained. The diner also expanded its operations, starting a mentorship program that paired veterans with at-risk youth. This program was a huge success, providing guidance to the youth and a sense of purpose to the veterans. One day, about a year after the documentary's release, John received a call that left him stunned. It was from a prominent national civil rights organization. They had seen the documentary and were deeply moved. They invited John, Michael, and Tom to their annual conference to share their experiences. At the conference, they were received with great respect. Their presentation inspired the audience, and the organization announced a national initiative inspired by the Veteran Table to promote community healing and racial reconciliation. John, Michael, and Tom were asked to serve as advisors for the program. Amidst all the media attention and new opportunities, John, Michael, and Tom remained grounded. They knew that true change came from day-to-day efforts. Their journey, which started with a single act of prejudice, had now become a beacon of hope for many. And as they looked to the future, they were determined to continue their work, knowing that the fight for equality and understanding was an ongoing one.
If this story touched you, show your support by liking and subscribing. Your encouragement helps us keep sharing memorable stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.